Okay, show
It's a
me.
thumbnail.
So, wait, this is a whole movie? It's a real movie or what?
It's a real movie. It's literally just the whole movie recapped.
Today we are going. Hello everyone. I'm John from Fast Films and today we are going to take a look at a 2021 American romantic comedy horror film called Some Like It Rare. The movie begins with a butcher named Vincent preparing meat for a customer. His wife Sophie anxiously waits for him to complete his procedure at the cash counter while she makes awkward eye contact with the customer. After Vincent completes massaging the meat, he packs it and gives it to Sophie. She packs it in a bag and hands it to the customer, apologizing to her for making her wait so long. After the customer leaves, Sophie expresses her dismay to Vincent, saying he takes too long to prepare the orders. Just then, a group of masked vegan activists attacks the couple. They throw blood at them and trash the shop before running away. Vincent chases after them and manages to pin a masked guy on the ground. After a bit of struggle, he is able to pull the mask off. However, the vegans' group mates come to his rescue. They beat Vincent up and run away, chanting, "V Power." In the next scene, Sophie is seen crying to her friend, Stephanie. As they prepare lunch together, Sophie tells her how the bank refused to loan them and that they are going bankrupt. Stephanie tries to cheer her up but then starts boasting about how her husband makes good money. It's revealed that Stephanie and her husband Mark also own a butcher shop that's doing very well. While having lunch together, Stephanie and Mark keep on blabbering about how their business is going great and all. After some time, Mark gets up and brings out a present for Vincent. He opens the box to see a gun inside, which Mark thought might be good for Vincent to have for protection from the vegan extremists. Stephanie tells them the price of the gun, taking this moment to brag about their financial status again. Unfortunately, Vincent does not have a permit. On their way back from lunch, Sophie mentions she's thinking of separating from Vincent since she wants to be with someone who will give her a thrill. On the road, Vincent spots the vegan that had trashed their shop. To teach the vegan a lesson, he puts his car in reverse gear and ends up killing him. Vincent panics and explains he only meant to hurt the man. Vincent thinks about calling the police and reporting the accident, but Sophie stops him, saying he has a gun without a permit and that would cause them trouble. She further adds that if the police found out that the man is a vegan extremist and Vincent would have a motive to get rid of him, he would get a life sentence. Vincent asks her what they should do. Sophie replies that they should copy Michel Francois, who dissected his victim and left them in garbage bags all over the city.
Wait, what?
Vincent takes the body to the shop and starts butchering it into pieces. While cutting the man, one of his ears falls onto the floor and Vincent's dog gobbles it up. Seeing that the dog wants more, Vincent chops the other ear off and feeds it to the dog. After that, he goes up to his room to sleep, but Sophie tells him to sleep on the couch in the living room. In the morning, Sophie tries to wake Vincent up to start working, but he says that he couldn't sleep and refuses to get up. When he goes to the shop after waking up, he does not find the pieces of the body he had chopped up. Vincent asks Sophie if she's seen any ham. Sophie tells him it's on the slicer. Just then, their regular customer, Mrs. Coignard, comes into the shop and tells them that she loved the meat so much that she needs to purchase more. She orders 10 more slices.
What?
Vincent tries to persuade the lady to buy andouillette instead of that meat, saying it's also fresh and tasty, but the lady remarks she only wants what she was given earlier. Sophie also tells Vincent to give the lady what she demands. With an excited smile, Coignard tells them that their ham has always been good, but today it was extraordinary. She asks Vincent if they have changed their supplier. Vincent tells her that he has. At that, Sophie asks to try a piece of the new meat. Vincent brings her a piece and Sophie tries it. She also finds the taste to be amazing and asks Vincent where it's from.
Wait, what the
As a response, Vincent says it's pork imported from Iran. He makes up a story that there are some illegal pork farms in Iran and that a French vendor got his hands on it. After the lady leaves, Vincent explains to Sophie that it was actually human flesh she sold to the lady. He had chopped it up like meat so he could slowly discard it, passing it off as leftover rotten meat. Vincent tries to throw it away, but Sophie stops him, saying it's really tasty and selling it might be the best way to get rid of the body.
What?
Vincent resists, but another customer comes in and demands the same meat Coignards purchased. With this, the couple starts selling it. They call it Iranian pork and make a lot of money with it. Vincent takes a pinch home that night to try it for himself.
Fuck off.
He cooks it and tries it. The taste drives him crazy as well. Sophie suggests that they should hunt the vegan extremists and sell their flesh to generate more profit. This would save them from going bankrupt. The next day, the couple's daughter brings home her boyfriend. The family serves him a fancy dinner, but he refuses to eat it, saying he's a vegan. Sophie and Vincent are surprised to hear this. They ask their daughter to have some, but she also refuses to eat, saying she's given up meat out of respect for Lucas. The couple tries feeding them a drink and cake, but they refuse it, saying the cake is made out of eggs and the drink is not vegan. The couple
What?
realizes that all their preparations for a family meal has gone to waste. To add insult to injury, Lucas insults Sophie before leaving, saying old cows like her are butchered for meat by cruel meat eaters. This enrages the couple. Vincent decides to go forward with Sophie's plan to hunt vegans for profit. At night, Vincent goes after a chubby vegan restaurant owner. He attempts to attack but gets cold feet midway and aborts the mission. He gets in the car and they drive away. In the car, Sophie tells him that he chickened out because he did not have a plan. Their next plan commences as they blend in with vegans to search for a potential target. They pretend to be against meat eaters and a skinny guy comes to them, praising them for their good work. As they chit-chat, they form a plan to meet up later. The couple later awaits the vegan in their car. The vegan pulls up in a van and they prepare to put their plan into action. To their dismay, they realize that the vegan brought some of his friends as well. Thus, the couple has to abort the plan. The vegan suggests they go and raid a meat processing plant. Going along with the pretense, the couple agrees and tags along. After reaching the plant, the couple realizes that it belongs to their friends Mark and Stephanie. Nevertheless, they trash the place with the vegans and completely wreck it. After that, the couple goes to eat at a restaurant. While having a conversation about hunting victims, the couple gets into a fight and Vincent angrily storms off. As Sophie sits there alone, the waiter takes his shot on her and also gives her a ride home later. When Sophie finds out that he is a vegan, she flirts with him and takes him inside her house. After getting inside, she tells Vincent that she kissed the guy and he loses his temper. However, this is not enough to finish himself off. Vincent attempts to send the guy home, but seeing he is planning to go much further with his wife, Vincent loses it and eliminates him. The couple cleans up the mess and gets rid of the body. The next day Stephanie calls Sophie to inform her of the destruction at the plant. When the couple arrives at the scene, Mark is seen arguing with the officer heading the investigation. Amidst all the ruckus, the officer takes Vincent aside and asks if he's got any more of the Iranian pork. Vincent says yes. Later that day, the couple again sells Iranian pork, and numerous customers line up for it. It gets sold out real fast and the customers still left in line leave without purchasing any other kind of meat. After that, the couple decides to make vegan hunting a regular thing.
But that one is fat,
that night, they eliminate the restaurant owner they first set their eyes on and begin a daily killing spree. They increase the rate of meat and generate a high profit from it. At their next lunch with Mark and Stephanie, the couple brings along the Iranian pork to make their friends try it. They both also fall in love with the taste. However, Mark accidentally bites onto something while eating. Being a former nurse, Stephanie recognizes the device like a pacemaker. Vincent manages to defuse the situation. However, the competition between both the couple's meat shops initiates an argument. The argument turns into a physical fight with Mark and Vincent trying to hurt each other. During the fight, Vincent bites off Mark's ear and starts chewing on it. With blood flowing down his ear, Mark looks at Vincent, completely shocked. To clear suspicion, Vincent spits the ear out, saying the taste is bad. The couple leaves with this and continues the hunting. They make a good fortune and their relationship gets better with all the money coming in and the time they spend together hunting. Whenever Vincent talks about how it's all wrong, Sophie brushes the topic away. While the couple is out at a picnic in the forest, a vegan comes to them, saying they've taken his yoga spot. The couple pretends to leave but later returns with a shotgun and finishes him off. Next, Sophie and Vincent go to a vegan festival to choose their prey. When Vincent's eyes land on a little fat boy, he isn't able to resist the urge or look away. Realizing that he's a complete cannibal now, Vincent gets disturbed and tries to leave. However, the couple is spotted by Lucas and their daughter. Lucas is surprised to see butchers at the vegan planet. While chatting, Lucas starts discussing the missing vegans and lets out all his anger at the couple. He loudly says that they are butchers and leaves. This is heard by a vegan who they went to trash Mark and Sophie's place with. After that, Vincent and Sophie leave the festival. Outside, they see a chubby woman and attack her. While butchering her at night, Vincent breaks his meat cleaver. He goes to the front of the shop to get the spare. A sudden knock at the door gets him on edge. He checks to see who it is to see the officer, who has become his regular customer on the round. Vincent lets him in. The officer explains that he was just checking in since the lights were on. Vincent explains that everything is fine and that he is out of the Iranian pork. The officer shows interest in the chat and tells Vincent about the missing vegans. Just then, the dog comes out with a hand in his mouth. Vincent panics for a moment but he manages to send the dog away by shouting, covering it up with a fake story of having PTSD. The officer leaves but Vincent gets the feeling that he is onto him. He tells this to his wife but she assures him that they will not be found since they have gotten rid of all the bodies and no evidence will ever be found. Vincent tells Sophie that he got rid of the meat of their most recent prey. He had scattered all the parts around the city in garbage bags. Vincent is fearful of getting caught and wants to end this, but Sophie tells him that they are already at a good spot and he should stop panicking. Vincent still seems to be very disturbed by all the things they've been doing and doesn't want to continue. As they talk, the doorbell rings. They go to check and find Lucas at the door. Lucas
This
apologizes
fucking
to
guy,
them for
dude.
misbehaving earlier. He explains that he's been very distressed since the disappearance of all his friends. Sophie comforts him and hints to Vincent that this must be their next prey. Not wanting to continue, Vincent escorts Lucas to the door and makes him leave. He tells her that the Iranian pork is over and he will not continue with this madness. The next
She's
day,
gonna
when he
kill him.
tells the customers that the Iranian pork farmer has retired, the customers leave without buying anything else. Sophie starts to argue again, but Vincent leaves the shop. Behind him, the vegan group they destroyed Mark's plant with comes to the shop to take revenge against them for their betrayal. Sophie attempts to send them away, but they don't listen. Outside, Vincent spots the vegans' van and realizes that something's wrong. Just as the vegans are about to eliminate Sophie, Vincent intervenes. Extreme bloodshed follows, but eventually, the couple manages to finish the extremist group off. The story ends as the couple is arrested with a kill count of 30. It's revealed that Mark and Stephanie were the ones who reported Vincent's odd behavior, and this led to them getting caught. Due to their crimes, the couple gets a life sentence. Thank you for watching.
Oh, that was a trash ending. What the fuck is that? They survived just to go to jail? That's just poor writing. Come on now. That's just poor writing. They survive an insane fight with bloodbath at a bunch of and then they go to jail?
Dude, there's so many movies you could watch.
Each year, students with the lowest test scores are killed in order to control overpopulation.
W.
That sounds kind of insane. Does anybody, can we check for Teos in this one or not? Is it a good horror one or watch it after?
Wait, make sure this isn't the guy that speaks though.
To movie recap.
Nope.
Oh, it's good. It's good.
Wrong video?
Yeah, I'm gonna get some food to eat though. I'll be here if you want to play some after.
Okay, yeah.
Today I will show you an action, drama, horror film from 2016, titled The Thinning. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In the near future, the UN requires countries to cut their population by 5% every year in order to combat overpopulation. America gives its students a standardized test every year, and executes the students with the lowest scores. The test is called the 10 to 241 or the thinning. In Austin, Texas, students prepare for the thinning, which takes place in 18 hours. Simon and his older sister, Lena, sit at a desk in his room as Lena tries to mentor him. Their younger siblings, Corinne and Joey, sit on the bed playing games. Even with Lena's help, Simon gets frustrated and says he can't learn enough before the test. He asks Lena for something and gives her money in exchange for a contact lens that he can use to cheat. When he tries it on, it displays the answers to the math problems in his notebook. She reminds him that he has to destroy it after the test. Lena then receives a call from Dr. Perkash, who tells her that her mom had been trying to get discharged from the hospital against medical advice. She asks the doctor to stall her mom and tells her siblings that they have to go. At the hospital, Lena intercepts her mom signing herself out. The doctor pulls Lena aside and reveals that her mom is only getting worse. Even though they can't treat her if she goes home, he explains that making her comfortable might be the most they can do for her. At the governor's mansion, just 12 hours until the thinning, Blake passes a few bodyguards in the hallway. He offers to get them something from the kitchen, but they decline. Instead, Blake sneaks out of the house to his car where he finds his girlfriend, Ellie. She startles him and jokes that the same trick always works on him. When Blake insists that this time would be the last, they sober, remembering the next day's test. Ellie refuses to talk about it and instead decides to show him something that she insists is secret. She leads him to the Bilskis' mansion, where they strip and swim in the pool. Afterwards, they kiss in the car until Ellie admits that she's scared about the test. Then Vince, one of the bodyguards, catches them and brings Blake back to his dad. Blake's dad, Governor Redding, lectures his son and tells him that while it's okay to have fun, that he has to pick better moments. He insists that Ellie is a distraction that Blake can't afford until he gets through tomorrow's test, and his final test next year. After that, Blake can be distracted for the rest of his life. Governor Redding gives Blake a hug before he leaves the room. 3 hours before the thinning, guards patrol a militaristic school surrounded in chain-link fences, barbed wire, and cameras. Students approach the facility, watched by guards in black masks. Simon bumps into another student, drops his contact lens, and is unable to find it. The guard orders him to keep moving. Blake approaches Lena as she watches students saying goodbye to their parents. He asks for a study guide, but she explains that she gave the last one away. Kellen, her friend, asks about Blake, but she insists that she barely knows him. The guards check students for cheating devices, and when one guilty student is discovered, they chase him down and catch him with a net. Kellen uses his dad's security access to view the security footage and sends it to a reporter he claims to know, named Wendy Banks. He explains that he has her email, though she doesn't seem to respond to his tips. Inside the school, Blake tries to comfort Ellie. 15 minutes before the test begins, the guards lock down the school. The students gather in their classrooms and teachers review the rules. Miss Birch tells her students that she's proud of them and that the questions are tough but not meant to trick them. She also insists that there's always a chance. A second teacher, Mr. Glass, also goes over the rules and reminds the students that the test is an accurate aptitude assessment. He then orders them to begin and the lights in the classroom dim. Each student picks up a tablet and begins to take the test with the tablets lighting up their faces. The teachers warn the students when they have a minute remaining, then announce the end of the test. As the students wait for their results, some show signs of stress. They squirm in their seats, cry, or look uncomfortable. Kellen is amongst them. Eventually, names of the students who failed are read out. With each name called, a student is removed. Some cooperate, some beg, others require force. Kellen is relieved that he passed, but Ellie fails. The remaining students are congratulated for passing and released to the rec room. Lena sees Simon being led away with the failed students, and Blake calls his dad to beg for him to do something to save Ellie. But his dad insists that he has to obey the law. Blake gets angry and slams the locker. He runs after them and attacks a guard with a fire extinguisher. He tells Ellie to run as the guards are distracted, but she is stopped by the crowd and caught. 1 year later, the next test is 24 hours away. Lena sits at a table with her two younger siblings. They're surrounded by boxes and one holds a pamphlet that shows that her mother has passed away. Miss Birch visits to bring the family some extra casserole and tries to comfort Lena about the fact that Corinne would be taking her first test. Meanwhile, Blake works out in his room. He still has a picture of Ellie pinned to his wall. He begins to record a video on a tablet, saying that if someone was watching it, he would already be dead. 3 hours before the test, Lena quizzes Corinne as they approach the school and hugs her before sending her inside. Governor Redding discusses plans for an announcement with Vince, checking that everything is ready. Then, he checks in with Blake. He tries to convince Blake that nothing could be done about Ellie, but Blake dismisses him. Blake leaves for school and Vince sees him put a package in a mailbox along the way. Lena and Kellen meet up at the school and talk about the fact that this is their last test. Kellen admits that he is nervous but recognizes that Lena probably isn't because of how smart she is. Instead, she's more nervous about Corinne than herself. On the way inside, Kellen runs into Wade, a quarterback that goes on to bully another kid. They wonder if he's actually smart enough to have survived this long. 15 minutes before the test, the school is locked down again. At the mansion, Vince approaches Governor Redding about his son and shows him the package Blake had tried to deliver. Mean? Inside is Blake's tablet where he recorded a video explaining his plan to intentionally fail the test. In the video he explains that if his dad wants to stand by this system, he'd have to stand by the system that killed his son. The governor demands for his son to be brought home, but the school is locked down and he throws a chair in frustration. Then he tells the other bodyguard to leave the room. Back at the facility, Blake waits to take his test and a dark-haired girl named Sarah looks at Mr. Glass. She'd slept with him to try to get a passing score. He doesn't meet her gaze. In a classroom of younger kids, Miss Cole shows her students a video before their first test. The video is created by a company called Ashuru Global and consists of a cartoon Earth explaining why the test had been implemented, as a way to deal with overpopulation. It lists how some other countries killed their elderly or restricted the amount of children a couple could have, but that America only lets the smart kids live there, allowing it to become the best country again. The video portrays the kids that failed the test as merely helping the planet to feel better. Miss Cole steps outside to take a minute for herself. A guard tells her that someone else can give the test if she's not up for it, but she declines the offer. She returns to the classroom as the kids finish the video and clap. She directs them to take the exciting test they've been practicing for. The older students also start the test. From the control room, Mason King watches over them and receives a call, which he answers. Blake finishes his test early in the classroom and Mr. Glass notices. Amongst the smaller kids, Nathan raises his hand for help on a question, but Miss Cole isn't allowed to help him, so she tells him to do his best. Once the test is finished, Miss Cole tells the students to stand up and follow the leader if their name is called. The teachers read out the names of the failed students. Among them are Nathan, Sarah, and Lena, but not Blake. Mason calls the mayor to confirm that the transfer was successful and that Blake is safe. The mayor then approves the commencement of the thinning. Blake watches as the failed kids are sent down the hall. Miss Birch runs to intercept a guard and insists that Lena is the best student she's had and that she can't believe that Lena could have failed. The guard checks with his superiors, but they insist that there's no problem and he's told to send Lena off. The teacher holds on to Lena for a moment and slips her a keycard, reminding her that there's always a chance and telling her to get away. In the rec room, students are congratulated for making it. They eat and dance to music. Miss Birch spots Mr. Glass flirting with another dark-haired student. Elsewhere, Governor Redding takes steps on stage for a big announcement. He starts by talking about all the ways he's improved things during his time as governor. He talks about the difficult but necessary decisions that had to be made. At the school, this speech plays on a TV at the
He's
party.
gonna punch it.
Blake sees it and leaves. As the governor continues to discuss how the thinning is not a barbaric practice, but is instead leading in innovation and an effort to make the population the best it can be, the failed kids are being led down a hallway. They are instructed to take off their clothes and to prepare for decontamination. Lena slips the keycard into her mouth to hide it. As Blake begins to make his way through the hallways of the school, his dad announces his candidacy for president. The failed kids are given new clothes, then led to a room with a few rows of chairs. They are each cuffed to a chair and the surrounding guards draw syringes. Some of the kids begin to panic. In the hallway, Blake acts hurt to lure a guard towards him then knocks him out. Then, he makes his way to the control room and sneaks inside after Mason leaves it. He tries to use the computer but it requires a login,
Oh my God,
so instead
password.
he shuts off the power to the school right as Mason has discovered the unconscious guard. Some of the failed kids are freed from their restraints and the guards try to regain control. Lena escapes during the chaos, opening the door with Miss Birch's keycard. Mason calls for Kellen's dad, Victor Wood, to be sent to the control room to fix the down system. The guards fetch him from the party, insisting that it is just a minor power outage to the rest of the guests. Mason then checks on the failed kids, who are back under the guards' control. He asks if they'd done a head count, and discovers they hadn't. They discover that Lena is missing. A guard notices Lena trying to get out a door, but she introduces herself as Miss Birch and tells him that she'd called him when she'd seen a student run down the stairwell. Once he turns his back to her, she attacks. Blake shows up and the two of them take the guard down. Lena and Blake talk and Lena insists that she couldn't have failed the test. Blake admits that he failed on purpose, but that his dad got him out.
Why,
Lena
what about the other girl,
realizes
though?
that something is off and when Blake sets off an alarm they climb into a vent to escape. Mason decides that the school will stay in lockdown until the situation is resolved, even as they surpass the time where parents were expecting to see their children. He hears about another guard who'd been attacked by someone who claimed to be a teacher, so he calls for all the teachers to be brought to a holding room. Lena and Blake talk about Lena selling cheats to desperate kids for the test. Blake judges her for taking advantage of them until she reveals that it was a desperate attempt to pay for her mom's treatments, which still wasn't enough. Blake apologizes for judging her. They start heading towards the server room through the vents. Governor Redding's interview is interrupted by news of the prolonged shutdown at the school and the news anchor asks him about it. The governor stumbles without any information, but insists that things will be resolved soon. Mason addresses the teachers and tells them to present their IDs and keycards. The governor calls him to get details about the situation and angrily tells them to figure it out quickly. Blake and Lena continue through the vents until Blake falls through one and into a pool below. Lena jumps in after him to save him and gets him to the edge of the pool where she resuscitates him with CPR. They get dry clothes from the lockers and change, turning their backs to each other for privacy. Lena finds another vent and they climb back in. In the rec room, the students who passed begin to get impatient with the guards and one of the guards beats up a student. Kellen records it on his phone and sends it to Wendy. Lena and Blake reach the outside of the server room, but the keycard falls out of Lena's pocket. With the keycard on the ground below the vent, they get to a science classroom where Lena gets a magnet to fish for the key. They make too much noise and as a guard approaches, Lena is able to get back into the vent while Blake stays in the room. He tries to hide, but the guard catches him. When Lena tries fishing for the key, a guard notices and grabs it. But the guard turns out to be Blake in a guard's uniform. He tells her that he'll head towards the thinning. In the holding room, Miss Birch suggests to Mr. Glass that they get a drink together and as they flirt she steals his keycard. Miss Birch then...
Why haven't the guards just killed the students already? Couldn't they just stop camping in there, just kill them and then go fix the problem?
Shows Mason her ID and Mr. Glass's keycard to take suspicion off of herself. When Mr. Glass doesn't have his, Mason thinks that he's the traitor. Lena arrives in the server room and finds a computer. She tries to use her keycard, but it requires Mason's password. She messages Kellen to get his help only to find out he's offline. Kellen receives Lena's message right as his dad returns the power. He sends her a video of Mason typing in his password, allowing her to copy it and get in. She checks Corinne's test score first and is relieved to see that she passed with an 86%. Next, she checks hers, to find that she got a 98% but still failed. Meanwhile, Wade had passed with a 42%, and Blake passed with a 15%. She also checks Ellie's score and finds that she failed, but got a score of 88%. She sees news coverage of Governor Redding claiming that Lena, after failing her test, had attacked several guards, killing 2 of them, and escaped. He places the blame for the shutdown on her. Meanwhile, Wendy sees the video that Kellen sent of the guard beating up a passing student, and she realizes that what is happening doesn't match the official story.
Who is that?
She responds to Kellen and broadcasts the footage. When Lena realizes that Kellen sent out footage from within the school, she sends him images of the score. Then Mason and Victor spot her on the cameras and she runs. Blake finds the thinning and tries to trick the guards into bringing the failed students to the recreation hall, but they won't accept orders from anyone besides Mason, so he tries to fight the guards. Lena is caught by Mason, insisting she has proof that she passed, but he sends her to the thinning where she finds that Blake has been subdued. Kellen receives Lena's proof of the test scores, both hers and Ellie's, so he sends the images to Wendy. Wendy reports on the documentation she'd received about the falsified test scores. She reveals that Lena failed despite having the highest score in the school, while Blake, son of the governor, had passed despite receiving the lowest score. At the mansion, Vince insists that Governor Redding has to shut this down and let Lena go, but Redding insists there's one more move. Mason calls to ask for his approval to commence the thinning, which he denies, saying that the list needs to be revised. Once changes are made, Lena is freed and told that she had passed. She goes to Blake and kisses him. She is then forced from the room and Blake is forced into her chair. Wade is also taken to the thinning. With varying levels of panic from the kids, the guards approach and inject them. Blake loses consciousness and the school is taken out of lockdown. Lena reunites with her little sister outside, hugging her with tears in her eyes. She's also joined by Miss Birch. Kellen hugs his dad, both smiling and relieved.
Wait.
The parents whose kids don't return to them begin to mourn as Wendy reports that Mason
How
King
does
has
that
been
fix
taken
the
in for
problem?
questioning regarding his involvement with the altered test scores. Wendy's report continues that suspicions of Redding's involvement were discounted once it was discovered that his son had been amongst the failed students. Redding announces that he will help to investigate the occurrences and continues by using Blake's failure to appeal to voters that he was just like that.
Okay, guys, I think this is probably the worst one we're gonna
A
watch on
large
them
truck
around.
approaches a new facility. The failed students, including Blake, are lowered into the building by elevator. They find a factory that builds the tablets the tests are taken on, where previous failed students are put to work.
Is the time
Make
one good? It's a good movie? Guys, this was ass. And it's not because Logan is in the movie. I don't mind that. Yeah, I don't give a shit. It was just the plot is just garbage. The idea of the plot is good, if, in my opinion, if they deepened the importance of the main topic without going to the dog shit storylines that don't make sense, that have just holes in the plot. A world where humans can live forever, so they use time as money. When you run out of time, you die. People said this is underrated, and people said this is good. This one is good? It's only 14 minutes.
An action, sci-fi, and thriller film called In Time. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In the future, humans have been genetically modified to stop aging at 25. The only caveat is when humans get to age 25, they only have 1 year left to live. A person's life is shown on their forearm with a timer, and time is now the world's currency. The rich can basically live forever, while the poor live their lives paycheck to paycheck, literally. Will wakes up and sees he has less than 24 hours left. He heads down and greets his mother, Rachel,
Fucking
who is
poor.
celebrating her 50th birthday. Their celebration is cut short when they start talking about finances. Rachel says she has 3 days left on her time and reminds Will of bills and loans they need to pay. Will reassures her that he'll come up with the money. Rachel says she'll be away for 2 days working and she'll pay alone. She tells Will he has to meet with her at a bus station so he can give her more time. She then hands Will 30 minutes so he can pay for a decent lunch. Will kisses her goodbye before heading to work. On his way to work, Will runs into a kid, Maya. She asks for a minute and Will happily gives her 5 minutes and sends her away smiling. He arrives at work and meets with his friend Borel.
Wait, what?
Will works at a factory making time storage devices. After a hard day's work, he clocks out and gets paid. He sees that his payment is lacking and demands more, but the distributor says the quota has increased and Will didn't reach it. Will later heads to a local bar and some men invite him to gamble, but he turns him down, but not after reminding one of the men he owes Will an hour. Will takes the hour and meets with Borel. Borel is drunk, pointing to someone who's been buying drinks for everyone. He says the man has over a century in his time. Will spots someone eyeing the man, and he decides to inform the man, Henry, that somebody is watching him. Will tells the man to leave as he's attracting
Is
too
that
much attention,
PewDiePie?
but the man refuses. A group of men enters and everyone at the bar is
Guys, is that
leave as
PewDiePie?
he's
What the
attracting too much
fuck?
attention, but the man refuses.
What? It's not okay.
A group
Why,
of men
for-
enters and everyone at the bar is suddenly rushing out. Borel tells Will that they're Minutemen, gangsters who rob and extort. Borel pulls Will away, but Will intends to stay and watch. He assures Borel that he wouldn't do anything stupid, and Borel leaves him. The leader, Fortis, tells Henry he wants his time and even offers Henry the chance to fight for it. Henry appears nauseous and heads to the bathroom. He vomits while a Minuteman keeps watches. Will suddenly bursts in, knocks the guy out, and takes Henry with him. Will and Henry run out and Fortis and his men chase after them. They manage to escape after climbing over a gate and hiding inside an abandoned building. The Minutemen are close behind and almost find them, but eventually give up their chase when one of the men tells Fortis that he recognized Will. Will and Henry get acquainted, and Henry reveals he's 105 years old. He says his mind is fatigued, and he desires death, explaining his rash behavior. Will gets mad, considering that he and his mother have to work several jobs just to live another day. Henry then reveals the secrets of their horrific world. Rich people increase the cost of living so that poor people keep dying, and, in turn, more time goes to the rich. The reality is that there is more than enough time for everyone. However, greed and lust for immortality blind the rich and powerful. Henry asks Will what he'll do if he had the same amount of time as him. Will answers that if he has that time, he
Too
will not waste it
real.
like Henry. Henry thinks about what Will says, and the two get rest. Morning comes, and Henry decides to give all but 5 minutes of his time to a sleeping Will. After a while, Will wakes up and discovers he is over a century in his time. He looks for Henry and sees him sitting atop a bridge. As Henry's final seconds count down, and he smiles falls into the river. Later, Will heads to Borel and sees Borel's wife, Greta, holding their newborn baby. Will asks for Borel, and he reveals to him the time he has. Will talks about the events of the night before, and Borel asks what he plans to do. Now that he has learned the truth, Will intends to bring justice. Before leaving, Will gives Borel. With his fortune, Borel eyes the bar on the other side of the street. Meanwhile, Rachel pays a loan of 2 days and attempts to ride the bus but finds
Why
that she
did-
can't afford the fare as the
Wait,
prices have
why do you
gone
give
up.
all of it?
She pleads to the driver and the passengers, but everyone looks away. Feeling desperate, she starts running. The two are in a race against time, and with every second and every step, death draws closer for Rachel. Finally, they see each other. They run as fast as they can, but death beats Rachel and Will. A lifeless Rachel falls into Will's arms. Will weeps, knowing they were mere seconds away from living the life they've always wanted. Will now has all the time he's ever wanted, but his mother has none. The following day, timekeepers retrieve Henry's body from the river. Raymond, the senior timekeeper, and Jaeger, his junior, investigate the scene. As they're about to leave, Raymond sees a camera on top of the bridge. Meanwhile, Will sits inside a car wearing a new suit and a new look on his face. They leave the time zone, a border that separates the different social classes. On his trip, they pass multiple borders, paying a toll fee that increases with each one. The last border costs Will a year, and the driver welcomes him to the city of New Greenwich. The driver asks Will what his true intentions are for coming to New Greenwich, and Will answers he wants to make the people of New Greenwich pay. The city is entirely different from what Will is used to. As he exits the car, he immediately starts running, still used to living with little time. He looks at his arm and starts acting more like a person who has all the time in the world. However, he already caught the attention of a woman named Sylvia. Will enters a hotel and asks for a suite. In his luxurious room, Will wakes up still with 105 years. Even though he lies down in the comfiest of beds in a room with the best view, the untimely death of his mom still haunts him. For the first time in his life, he experiences gourmet food and drinks. He pays for his meal and tips the waitress a week. The waitress
week?
notices
notices that Will doesn't act like everyone else, saying he does everything a little too fast. Will cheekily replies that he doesn't finish fast in the things that matter. Will plans to enter the casino, but first, he has to have a wardrobe change. In the timekeeper's headquarters, they see Will in the surveillance footage. Jaeger reports that a man crossed numerous borders going to New Greenwich. They gather more information about Will on the computer, and Raymond states that he knows Will's father. Will enters a casino and sits at a poker table. As the dealer deals, Philippe, a billionaire with eons in his time, acquaints himself with Will. Will's winnings after a few rounds of poker amounts to over 2 centuries. Philippe increases the pot by 50 years. Despite this, Will calls with total confidence, and the river turns out to be the 6 of diamonds. Will's focus shifts from the game to the lovely dame, Sylvia, who sits beside Philippe. Philippe rolls up his sleeves, revealing almost 10 millennia's worth of time. He then talks about the immeasurable gap between the poor and the rich, justifying it as natural selection. He raises 2 more centuries. Will bites and calls, leaving his arm with a mere 30 seconds left. The outcome
What?
favors Will, and he receives a millennium. This brought a thrill to Philippe's dull life. He notices Will looking at Sylvia and asks if he thinks she's his grandmother, mother, or wife. Will simply says that she's beautiful. Philippe introduces her as his daughter, and she invites him to a party. The next day, Will purchases a brand new car with his winnings which he drives to Philippe's mansion. There he's introduced to 3 generations of women that look as if they're sisters. Will looks out of place among the high-class crowd.
Jesus.
Sylvia approaches and saves him from a lonely
Just
night.
buy them out.
They get to know more about one another, and their conversation leads them to the dance floor. She asks him if he comes from the ghetto, but Will neither admits nor denies her claims. Sylvia opens up to him about her meaningless life and how the time that she is shackles her when it's supposed to
Just
grant
buy
her
all
freedom.
3 of them.
While this is happening, Philippe and her wife stare at the two with watchful eyes, causing Will to lead Sylvia outside to the beach. Will and Sylvia undress and dives into the waters.
Otherwise they die.
They float on the ocean, naked and inches apart, with the moonlight glowing on their arms. Sylvia distances herself, but the waves push her closer to him. Suddenly, someone calls out from the shore, disrupting the romantic moment. They return, and Philippe asks Will to join him for a game of poker. However, the timekeepers barge in and confront Will. They sit him in an office, and Raymond introduces himself. He asks him why he's in New Greenwich and how he has over a millennium's worth of time. Will answers honestly and says that Henry gave it to him, committing suicide in the process. Raymond doubts his explanation, confiscates his time, and arrests him. As he leaves, Will asks him why he investigates suicide when murders happen in the ghetto every day. Raymond is astounded by his statement as it reminds him of Will's father. Will then attacks the timekeepers guarding him and rushes out to hold Sylvia hostage. They enter through the kitchen, and the two drive off on his car. A car chase occurs, and Raymond rams Will's car, causing them to lose control.
What?
Will expertly maneuvers while in reverse, barely dodging an incoming truck.
Oh,
They lose the
J-turn!
timekeepers and hide underneath a bridge. Will asks for Sylvie's time, but she refuses. Morning comes, and they drive along the highways and run over traffic.
Wait, so what?
Barely dodging an incoming truck. They lose the timekeepers and hide underneath a bridge. Will asks for Sylvie's time, but she refuses. Morning comes, and they drive along the highways and run over traffic spikes. The tire punctures, and they crash. Fortis and his men approach the unconscious couple. He siphons time from Sylvia, but they leave in a hurry, leaving her with 30 minutes. Will gives her a few minutes, and they run off to get more time.
What?
With 3 minutes left, Will knocks on Borel's door. Greta answers and informs Will that Borel has died due to alcohol poisoning. Sylvia is in distress as she only has a handful of minutes left. Will notices her earring, and they rush to the jewelry dealer. Seeing that they're desperate, he underpays them and offers only 2 days. Will accepts, and they immediately hide as they hear the timekeeper's sirens. They walk through the city, talking about Sylvia's family business. Will asks how much they're worth, and she replies it's too much to the point that knowing it won't matter. Will calls Raymond and asks for Philippe to transfer 1,000 years to the ghetto city in exchange for Sylvia. Raymond warns him that if he continues, he'll end up dead like his father. Will says his father died fighting someone, but Raymond says Will's father was doing something more dangerous. Night arrives, and Sylvia makes herself at home at Will's apartment. She asks about his family, and Will opens up about her mother's passing. He reminisces about his father and how he was a gambler like him but on a different game. His father would play a game akin to gambling, but using his time. His father won a lot, but his acts of generosity caused his death. They find out they're around the same age, and their bond grows stronger as they share more about each other's past. Morning comes, and he observes if Philippe holds up his end of the deal. Will sees no time transfers, leaving Sylvia disappointed with her father. Despite not receiving the time, Will still intends to let Sylvia go. He escorts her to the phone booth, giving her a gun
It's
as a
his
farewell
daughter.
gift, and she returns the favor with a kiss. She calls her father and berates him for not delivering what Will wants. As they talk, Will is behind her, oblivious of Raymond pointing a gun at him. Sylvia turns and sees Raymond, and without hesitation, she shoots him. Will points a gun at a bleeding Raymond, but instead of taking his time, he gives some to Raymond, and the two drive off using his car. The two are parked on the side of the main road, and Sylvia asks if he has any plans. Since they're in a cop car, they play the part of a timekeeper, blocking an unfortunate driver. Sylvia gets too comfortable with the gun and fires a shot, scaring Will and the driver. They steal from the passenger and leaves with the new vehicle. Later that day, the two sit in the back seat and watch the news about them. Will states that she can still return to her father, but Sylvia doesn't want to return to her boring life. Will leans in for another kiss, now having time to do more than just that. In his office, Philippe talks to his partners and assures them that he didn't pay the ransom. They doubt his capabilities to resolve this issue, but Raymond enters the room before Philippe gets a chance to explain himself. He tells Philippe about her daughter not wanting to be rescued. Philippe apologizes and attributes his daughter's stubbornness to Stockholm Syndrome. Raymond does not budge and informs him that he plans to arrest his daughter. Philippe tries to bribe him with his time, but Raymond remains uninterested and leaves.
This guy.
The next day, Will teaches Sylvia how to shoot a gun properly.
He's real handsome too.
They talk about Will's plan to give time to the people, and she says that she can help him get the time he needs. At the local loaning establishment, a truck suddenly crashes through the glass panes. The two pull off a heist, stealing as much time storing devices as they can. They encourage the borrowers to get as much time as they want, and they all come rushing in. Later that day, Will gives time to Greta, Maya, and even the timeline distributor who gives people time as charity. Fortis continues to harass and kill people for time. He then sees on display a reward for 10 years for the capture of Will and Sylvia. Meanwhile, Philippe watches the news about his daughter's continuous pursuits to steal from him. Later that
The
night,
vault.
Raymond and the timekeeper surround a motel where the two stay in. Will and Sylvia notice they're surrounded, so they jump out the window to escape. Raymond chases after them through the streets and the dark alleyways. They make their way
I
up the roof,
saw
and
the
a shootout
pair.
commences. They manage to board a bus, losing Raymond. Fortis continues his search for Will and Sylvia. He interrogates a group, threatening to steal their time. When one dies, a man steps up and says he has information about their whereabouts. At the motel, the two
snitching.
sit on the couch together, talking about the challenges they're about to face. They both accept that if they get caught, they will die. At the period they've spent together, and at every time they almost died, Sylvia felt more alive than ever. Suddenly, the door gets knocked down by Fortis and his men. Feeling generous, Fortis gives Will a chance to play for his life. Fortis rolls up his sleeve for a game of strong arm, and Will accepts his challenge. Will struggles up to his final seconds, then, he turns it around when Fortis loses focus. His subordinates approach the table, and the fear in his eyes grows. Will grabs a gun from his ankle and shoots everyone while siphoning Fortis dry. Will and Sylvia stand on a rooftop, observing how prices keep rising. Will feels hopeless, saying that the rich will just increase the cost of living every time they steal. He says that only 1,000,000 years will make a difference. Sylvia agrees, but she has a plan in mind.
She's
The
gonna
next
rob
day,
her
Philippe
father.
enters a building with a plethora of bodyguards surrounding him. Sylvia catches their attention and asks for this father. Among the guards is Will, who points a gun directly at Philippe's head. He commands the guards to put their weapons down, and they take Philippe hostage.
Wait, what?
In his office is a time vault, and in there sits a device with 1,000,000 years. Philippe tries to explain that society will fail if that time falls to the wrong hands. He says that there will always be someone willing to sacrifice people for a shot at immortality. Will cannot contain his anger and points a gun at him, but he recoups his calmness. Will tells Philippe that immortality is not worth the life of even a single individual. The two then leave. Meanwhile, police vehicles start to barricade the main road. The timekeepers shoot at Will and Sylvia's car,
Nice
but they
AUG.
miraculously get through unharmed, ramming the toll booth to cross the border. Raymond doesn't give up and chases after them. They arrive at the ghetto, and as they're about to reach safety, Raymond intercepts and crashes into them.
Boom.
Will exits unscathed and asks Maya to distribute the 1,000,000 years. Raymond points a gun at the two, but the clamoring crowd blocks his line of sight, allowing for them to escape. Raymond hijacks a car, and the chase continues. Finally, they clash in the middle of the road. Raymond admits that he's also from the ghetto, and as he learned how to escape from poverty, his eyes were also open to the hard truth that the gap between the rich and the poor has to be maintained. As they talk, Raymond realizes that his time is up. He dies on the spot, and the two try to find a way to replenish theirs. In the distance is Raymond's car. They run towards it with seconds on their clock. Will gets there first and receives his time. He then runs to Sylvie, who has seconds left. The two run into each other's arms in the nick of time, and the two get to live for another day. Citizens are now crossing borders into more expensive zones. The Minutemen watch on as their societal hierarchy begins collapsing. Sylvie and will continue their routine, this time making their way to a massive time bank. Subscribe to watch more videos like this.
That's it? That's the ending?
This time making their way to a massive time bank.
This time, making their way to a time bank. End. Looks like a bad movie, but not terrible.
Today, I'm going to explain an action,
last one.
adventure, sci-fi film called Jumper. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. David Rice is a teenager living a normal life in a small rural town. He talks to
one.
Millie, a classmate whom he's attracted to. David gives Millie a snow globe as a gift, and Millie accepts it wholeheartedly. Another classmate, Mark, intervenes and takes the gift away, teasing David. Their classmate then throws the snow globe into the middle of a frozen lake, and David attempts to retrieve it. Millie tries to discourage him, but David continues. David gets to the snow globe, but the ice gives way, and he falls under. Millie runs to help, but David gets trapped under. The current drags David farther, and there's no chance he can get back onto the surface. Suddenly, he finds himself in the middle of the public library. David is completely disorientated and in complete confusion and shock, but tries to walk out of the library without arousing suspicion. David heads home, and his father, William, notes that he's late. David lives alone with his father, as his mother left him when he was a child. William asks where David had been, but he doesn't answer. William gets angry and chases David into his room. David locks his room, but William tries to force himself in. Just as William bursts in, David disappears and reappears in the library again.
Another TP.
David realizes that his newfound ability could be the key to a better life. He goes home and takes out some money he's saved. He decides to move to a bigger city and start a new life. David then tries to learn more about his abilities by practicing at a park, seeing if he can get better control of his powers. He looks through a tourist magazine and sees different tourist attraction sites all over the world, trying to teleport to those places. He sees the Empire State Building and remembers being there with his mother.
Uh-oh, don't fall
Mary.
down.
Things in his room suddenly start flying around, and he teleports to the Empire State Building. David then realizes that he can only teleport to places he's been to. With no money, David decides to use his powers to steal from a bank. He goes to a bank and asks to use the bathroom, and as he makes his way, he gets a glimpse of the interior of the bank's vault. That evening, David teleports into the vault and takes as much money as he can. He makes several trips, filling up his bag with each return. The following day, an investigation into the bank robbery begins. Roland Cox appears and tells the
What
bank
is
manager
that
he works for
hair?
the government. He then requests all video surveillance footage and the names of every person who has entered the bank in the
What
past
the
month.
fuck is
Roland
that?
notes that the bank vault had never been opened, and authorities have no idea how the robbery was performed. Roland appears to have knowledge of people who can teleport and theorizes that the theft could have been committed by one of them. Several years pass, and David now lives in downtown New York at a penthouse apartment. David lives in excess, having everything he needs and doing whatever he wants. His apartment is filled with pictures of different locations around the world, and he even has a secret room where he keeps currencies from different countries. David then teleports to a bar in London, spotting a beautiful woman. He teleports to her without caution, and another person, Griffin, sees him teleporting. He spends a night with the girl, and the following day, he heads out to Fiji to surf massive waves. He then heads to Egypt, having lunch on top of the Sphinx. In a tropical jungle, a man teleports, trying to escape. He teleports through the wilderness, but a cable is attached to him, rendering him unable to leave. Roland appears and walks up to him. The teleporter asks why Roland has done this to him, and Roland tells him that people who can teleport are abominations and must be exterminated. He then stabs the man, killing him. Roland then gets a phone call about the robbery that occurred several years back. David arrives back in New York at his apartment and discovers Roland is there. Roland tells David he's investigating a bank robbery, but he's not from the police. David asks Roland to leave, but Roland instead takes a baton and electrocutes David. David tries teleporting away but struggles to get farther than a few meters. Roland runs up, electrocuting David again and throwing him off a ledge.
No.
Roland then shoots a cable, attaching his baton to David. Roland attaches his baton to the floor, and this anchors David, disabling him from teleporting too far. David desperately tries to escape, teleporting to a hidden room in the wall and managing to cut off the cable. David takes several bags of money and disappears. He reappears back in his father's house in his old room. William hears David arriving and rushes to him. William begs David to stay, telling David that he's been unsure if he's going crazy on account of his son disappearing. David then tells William he's not going crazy but disappears just as quickly. The next day, David looks for Millie and finds her working at a local bar. He then runs into his old school bully, Mark, and they get into a brawl. David then ends up teleporting Mark into a bank vault and leaving him there. David returns to Millie, and the two catch up. David tells Millie that he's now in a banking profession and asks Millie how she's doing in the small town. Millie says she still dreams of traveling the world, and David offers her a trip to Rome with him. Millie is ecstatic hearing this and tells David she'd love to go with him. Behind them, Griffin is watching closely. A few hours later, David and Millie are in Rome, going to see the Colosseum. Meanwhile, Roland pretends to work for the CIA to get to Mark, who's at a police station. He asks him about what happened to him in the bank, and Roland learns of Millie and finds that she had just arrived in Rome. In Rome, David and Millie are at an apartment having a conversation about their lives and how they'd both hold out for the last couple of years. David and Millie then get romantic and share an intimate moment.
Hey! Toes. Oh my. Chaz, there any toes in there? Come on, don't lie to me, dude. I'm trying to watch a video, man.
Hold out for the last couple of years. David and Millie then get romantic and share an intimate moment, kissing passionately. Later that day, David sneaks Millie into the Colosseum, and they explore around, avoiding guards. David then separates from Millie to open a locked door and finally runs into Griffin. Griffin reveals himself to be another person who can teleport, referring to himself and others like him as jumpers. Griffin calls David out for his lavish and carefree lifestyle and tells him that a group of people called paladins are determined to kill all jumpers. Just as he explains, a pair of paladins appear. The paladins approach and take out their batons, and a fight breaks out. David tries to run but gets snagged by one of the electrified cables. His teleport ability is again disabled. Griffin then proceeds to fight the two paladins, quickly overpowering them. He disables both pursuers and tells David that he's been killing paladins for a long time. He then teleports away to his secret lair. David sees a residue called a jump scar from Griffin's jump and follows. Griffin warns him off, and David returns to Millie. David then now takes Millie away, leading her out of the Coliseum, but Millie demands an explanation for what is happening. Before David could start explaining, the police arrive and arrest David for breaking into the Coliseum. At the police station, David is questioned but maintains that he's only a tourist who violated rules and is sorry for it. The officers then leave David, telling him to wait for the magistrate from the U.S. Embassy. As David waits, a woman enters, and David recognizes it to be Mary, his mother. Mary tells David he only has 30 seconds before more paladins arrive and hands him a key to his handcuffs. Mary hurries back out, and David chases after her, but he loses her. David then meets back up with Millie, and the two head for the airport. At the airport, David tells Millie that they have to separate. Millie is disappointed to hear this but proceeds with her flight alone. Meanwhile, Roland arrives at William's house and introduces himself as part of the IRS. Roland asks about David, but William is unwelcoming and uncooperative. William tells Roland that he hasn't seen David for 8 years. He also mentions how Mary left him and David when David turned 5.
Oh, because it's
William
secret
asks Roland to leave, but Roland refuses. David arrives at Griffin's hideout and sees Griffin's walls full of pictures and information about paladins around the world. David asks Griffin for an explanation as to why paladins are killing jumpers, and Griffin explains that the war has been going on since the Dark Ages. According to Griffin, the paladins are religious fanatics who believe that the power to teleport should only lie with God. He then tells David that paladins won't hesitate to kill anyone just to get to David. Realizing his father and Millie could be in trouble, David teleports to William and finds him unconscious on the floor. He teleports them to a hospital, and medical personnel rush to help William. David returns to Griffin's hideout wanting to get more information on Roland as he intends to kill him. Griffin says it's useless as he's been tracking Roland for more than 10 years, and with each encounter, Griffin only comes out with more scars. David offers to help catch Roland, but Griffin turns him down. Griffin then teleports to China, but David follows, still trying to convince Griffin to let him help. Griffin finally agrees when David tells him that he knows where Roland could potentially turn up next, pertaining to Millie. They decide to split up. David would get Millie while Griffin heads back to the hideout to arm himself.
Spoiler.
David arrives at Millie's apartment. Millie is surprised to see David again and tells him that she doesn't want to be associated with him anymore. Millie tells David to leave, but David hears Roland and a few more men arriving. With no other choice, David has to tell Millie the truth, revealing himself as a jumper. Millie is dumbfounded to witness David's powers and freaks out, running away. Knowing danger is upon them, David grabs her and teleports them both to Griffin's hideout. Roland and the other paladins enter Millie's apartment and see it empty, but Roland finds a jump scar. They take out a contraption, setting it below the jump scar, and a portal starts forming.
What?
They're attempting to reopen the jump scar so that they can follow David. David meets with Griffin, but Griffin is outraged seeing Millie there with them. Griffin tells David about the Paladin's machine and says bringing Millie to the hideout would only lead the Paladins right to them. David and Griffin check on the jump scar and see it getting larger. Seconds later, Roland appears. David and Griffin hide, but as David hides, he sees a picture of Mary on Griffin's wall of known paladins. David then gets tagged with an electrified cable and is pinned to a wall. Griffin comes in carrying a flamethrower. Griffin and Roland then get into a fight with Griffin using his teleporting abilities to gain the upper hand. Roland also puts up a good fight, utilizing the Paladin's technology. Griffin punches Roland out of the hideout and teleports away but returning with a running bus aimed directly at Roland. Roland has little time to react but still manages to dodge the oncoming bus. Millie finds David stuck to a wall, and she tries to get him free, but Roland appears ready to kill her. Millie stands frozen, but Griffin appears again with the flamethrower and blasts Roland back into the jump scar. Griffin jumps in after him. Roland and Griffin reappear back in Millie's apartment, and the fight continues. Back in the hideout, Millie successfully frees David but tells him that she wants to go home. She doesn't want to be involved in anything that's happening and just wants to get back to her normal life. David is left with no choice and agrees. As he prepares to take Millie back, Griffin reappears successfully, carrying the Paladin's jump scar opener. But with the jump scar still active, the Paladin still managed to launch a cable and captures Millie, taking her back to the apartment.
What?
David wants to rescue Millie, but Griffin prepares a bomb. David is confused, but Griffin tells him that this is his chance to end the Paladins once and for all. He intends to teleport to the apartment with the bomb. David protests and teleports away with the bomb. Griffin chases after him, and the two end up fighting, teleporting through many different locations. They teleport to Egypt, San Francisco, New York, all while fighting for the bomb's remote detonator. They end up in a war-torn country, and Griffin finally gets the detonator. But Griffin doesn't see that a pylon is falling on top of them. David teleports Griffin into the pylon, letting the massive amount of electricity capture Griffin, pinning him down. Griffin tries to discourage David into returning to the apartment, saying he won't stand a chance against 5 paladins, but David is determined to rescue Millie. David returns to the apartment and gets to Millie but is immediately stung by 5 electrified cables that the paladins anchor to the apartment. David struggles, still focusing on teleporting away. This causes the entire apartment to shake violently. With the wires attached to David in the apartment, every time David tries to teleport, the apartment also goes with him. He grunts and shouts, and the apartment walls jolt and crack. Finally, he teleports the entire apartment back to the lake, where he discovered his abilities. Most of the paladins are disabled, and some of them drown, and David then teleports the apartment back to the library. David regains consciousness and sees that Roland is still alive. David then takes Roland and abandons him somewhere in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Time passes, and David locates his mother. Mary's daughter answers the door, and David and Mary finally talk. Mary explains that she's also a paladin. When David teleported for the first time at the age of 5, Mary made the difficult decision to leave him to protect him from the other paladins. Now that they've reunited, David asks what would happen. Mary then answers that she would give him a head start. David then returns to Millie waiting for him outside. The two hold hands, smile at each other and teleport away. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. I enjoyed it.
Story recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a sci-fi thriller film called Limitless. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Eddie Mora is an aspiring writer living in New York. For the past several months, he's been living off of a book contract advance and financial support from his girlfriend. The only problem is that he hasn't written a single word of his book. He struggles writing his story, going through a continuous cycle of writing, deleting, and starting over. He spends his afternoons drinking at a bar or wasting away on his couch in a messy apartment. Eddie's fiancée, Lindy, decides to end their relationship as she sees Eddie incapable of straightening out his life. Lindy says she hasn't seen any progress on Eddie's part, and with her career taking a big step forward, she can't afford to be taking care of Eddie all the time. Eddie says he loves her, and he wants to spend the rest of his life with her, but Lindy leaves. While walking home, a man, Vernon, calls out to him. Vernon is Eddie's ex-wife's brother. Eddie had a short-lived marriage with his college sweetheart, Melissa. Eddie remembers Vernon as Melissa's drug-dealing little brother, but Vernon says those days are behind him. Vernon invites Eddie for a drink at a bar and quizzes him, asking for updates about his life. Vernon says Melissa has remarried and has 2 kids of her own now, and Eddie tells him he's trying to write a book and admits he's having a hard time starting it. Vernon sees Eddie having creative problems and offers help. He takes out a small pill and offers it to Eddie. Eddie refuses, saying Vernon is still dealing. Vernon says the drug is legal, already finished with lab tests, approval from the Food and Drug Administration, and will be sold the following year. He has early access to it as he works for the pharmaceutical company that makes it, calling it NZT. Eddie is unconvinced, saying he knows a designer drug when he sees one. Regardless, Eddie is interested, and Vernon says the pill helps unlock formant receptors in the brain, allowing them to use 100% of their brain power. Vernon gets an urgent phone call and tells Eddie he'd love to meet up some other time, handing Eddie his card. Eddie refuses the pill, but Vernon insists, saying a single tablet costs $800.
Long
On his way
time
home,
ago, but
Eddie contemplates his life. Thinking he's already at his low point, he takes the NZT, reasoning out that his life couldn't get any worse. He runs into his landlord's wife on his way up, and she cusses him out for being late on his rent. She shouts at Eddie, saying he'll never amount to anything and that he'd soon be homeless. Eddie has lost focus on what the lady is saying as the NZT is taking effect. He feels dizzy, and the drug's effect finally hits. He sees the lady's bag and in it, a book about law. Eddie deducts that the lady dislikes him, but something else must be bothering her. He asks about law school, and the lady is surprised how Eddie knows about her studying law. Eddie recalls seeing the book once several years ago in a dorm room when he was still in college.
Okay, dude.
Somehow, he now remembers everything he's ever read, seen, and heard in his entire life. Eddie then recommends a different book on the law that would be more appropriate for her assignment and continues advising her about how she could proceed with her assignment. The lady is impressed, even attracted.
Wait, is it toes? Someone says toes. Guys. No?
Eddie's sudden mastery of law in court. She invites her in, he helps with her assignment, and they eventually have intercourse. Eddie is perplexed as to how he suddenly has all of this knowledge. He realizes that he always had this knowledge, just in a random mess in his head. The NZT must have helped his brain rearrange and analyze the pieces of information.
Okay, yeah. Guys, I don't want to start the video too much, chat. Guys, This feels like this was written by somebody who took Adderall for the first time and it kicked
random
way
mess in
too
his head.
hard.
The NZT must have helped his brain rearrange and analyze the pieces of information he has in his head and turned them into a congruent and organized thought that he now has complete access to. Every documentary, every magazine article, every movie, every commercial, anything he's ever read and seen has now been turned into an accessible stream of information. He heads back to his dirty apartment and starts cleaning.
Holy shit.
He starts writing and ends up with a 90-page preliminary manuscript. The NZT not only gave him superior knowledge but also gave him a boost in motivation. The following day, he feels the NZT's effects had worn off. He takes his manuscript to his editor. The editor is doubtful but reads it anyway. When Eddie reaches home, he receives voice messages from his editor praising him. Eddie then decides he'd need more NZT and heads to Vernon's apartment. Eddie shows up at Vernon's apartment, and Vernon immediately knows what Eddie wants. Eddie sees Vernon has bruises and scratches on his face and asks him what happened, but Vernon avoids answering. Vernon then reveals that he lied about the NZT being legal and approved by the FDA regardless. Eddie still wants more. Vernon asks Eddie to head out to do some chores, and Eddie complies, thinking he'd do what's necessary to get more NZT. He arrives back at the apartment and sees the door busted open. He sees Vernon's apartment had been ransacked and Vernon on the couch with a bullet hole on his head. Eddie calls the police but realizes he needs to find Vernon's NZT stash before the cops arrive. He finds a pack of NZT along with Vernon's list of clients and cash. At the police station, Eddie is interviewed and gets a phone call from Melissa. The police then tell Eddie they'll stay in contact. At home, Eddie takes another pill and his creative juices start flowing.
Fuck yeah.
With Vernon's cash, Eddie gets a haircut and new clothes. He starts getting in shape and even finishes his book in 4 days. He learns to play the piano in 3 days and notices he can learn any language by listening to it. Eddie becomes outgoing, meeting new people and impressing everyone with his mastery of almost any field. He becomes daring, his shyness gone, and he feels like he could achieve anything he ever wanted. Eddie gets a realization and suddenly knows what he needs to do. He'd delve into the world of stock trading. He meets Kevin, a broker working in Wall Street, and he becomes Eddie's entry point into the world of stocks. Eddie starts reading books on stock trading and monitors the stock market for movement. With NZT, he grew Vernon's remaining $800 to $2,000 in a day. The next day, it reaches $7,500. Eddie needs more capital for more growth and decides to seek help from a loan shark, Gennady. Gennady decides to give Eddie the loan but warns that he must be paid on time, or else something terrible would happen to Eddie. Eddie accepts the risk, confident that he would pay Gennady back in no time. The following day, Eddie heads to Kevin's brokerage firm and starts buying and selling stocks. Within 2 weeks, Eddie increased his brokerage account to over $2 million. Word starts getting around, and soon, Kevin calls him to say that a Wall Street tycoon wants to meet with him. That evening, Eddie has dinner with Lindy, and he tells her all about the good things he's been doing with his life. Seeing Eddie clean up his act, Lindy is proud, and Eddie tells her he just got a sudden wake-up call and decided to get his life together. After dinner, they head back to Lindy's place and make love. Over the next couple of days, the couple rediscovers their love, and soon, Lindy tells Eddie that she wants to be together with him again. As they talk about restarting their relationship, Eddie spots a man eyeing him from a distance. Later that night, Eddie stares out the window, looking to see if he'd spot the man but sees nothing. Lindy is in bed asking him to join her, but Eddie stumbles, and he's transported to the hallway in an instant. Eddie has no recollection of how he got out of his apartment, but Lindy sees him and asks him to go inside for a meal. The following day, Kevin joins Eddie for their meeting with the Wall Street giant. Kevin is nervous, but Eddie assures him that the meeting would be fine. Carl Van Loon, a Wall Street icon, arrives, and they start talking. Carl's companion is suspicious of Eddie and how he climbed up the ladder so fast, thinking it's a con, but Eddie talks his way through his questioning and impresses Carl. On a car ride home, Carl hands Eddie a stack of papers about the companies he owns and asks Eddie to take a look and to analyze a pattern and asks him what a good move would be. Eddie takes a thorough look and realizes that Carl must be planning a massive merger with a competing company. Carl is impressed even further, noticing how nobody could have figured that out in such short of a time. Carl gives Eddie a chance to restructure the deals between the companies and asks Eddie to meet him the following day. Eddie takes the challenge and exits Carl's limousine but decides he doesn't want to go home. He instead starts walking, wanting to take as much information as he can. Still, he finds himself having episodes of unconsciousness, finding himself in different parts of the city, and having no recollection of how he got there. He stumbles into several parties, into different clubs, meeting different women, and eventually ending up in a hotel room with a model where they have intercourse. Unbeknownst to Eddie, the strange man he had seen earlier is following him.
This is like when you're on the phone, you're on a phone, and you're talking about something, and it's the same thing, you're kind of like teleporting.
After leaving the hotel, Eddie heads to the subway, where he runs into a group of thugs and gets into a fight. The NZT helps him remember every self-defense video, action movie, fight scene, and survival documentary he's ever seen, and he manages to fight off the group of thugs single-handedly. He starts running afterward and finds himself atop the Brooklyn Bridge by dawn with no recollection of what happened to him in the past 18 hours. He heads home and gets to bed but is awakened by his alarm, reminding him about the meeting with Carl. Afraid that he might run into another episode of amnesia, Eddie decides not to take an NZT pill. He looks through the files that Carl sent him but finds that he can't understand the data. Kevin calls, and Eddie tells him he needs to postpone the meeting, but Kevin says he'll never get another chance if he cancels now.
Wait.
Eddie arrives at
sorry, I need to go back.
He starts running afterward and finds himself atop the Brooklyn Bridge by dawn with no recollection of what happened to him in the past 18 hours. He heads home and gets to bed but is awakened by his alarm, reminding him about the meeting with Carl. Afraid that he might run into another episode of amnesia, Eddie decides not to take an NZT pill. He looks through the files that Carl sent him but finds that he can't understand the data. Kevin calls, and Eddie tells him he needs to postpone the meeting, but Kevin says he'll never get another chance if he cancels now. Eddie arrives at the meeting without taking NZT, and he's noticeably less focused, dizzy, and even has trouble speaking. Carl notices Eddie is out of focus and asks him about Hank Atwood, the competing businessman he intended to merge with. Carl says Atwood was a nobody and had a meteoric rise in the world of stock trading. Carl is perplexed about how Atwood had such a steep rise, now ready to go toe-to-toe with him. Eddie doesn't focus on Carl and instead fixes his gaze on the television where he sees a new report of a woman who had been found dead at the hotel, the same woman he was with the night before. Eddie loses all focus and excuses himself from Carl.
He
heads out and starts vomiting, his stomach churning at the thought that he may have killed someone. He heads home and gets a call from Melissa, who is asking questions about Vernon's death. Eddie asks her if they could meet up somewhere, and Melissa reluctantly agrees. Eddie goes through Vernon's notebook at a park, looking up Vernon's clients and calling them to find out more about the effects of NZT. Each number he calls, he gets an answer saying the person had died. Each of them had experienced severe headaches, vomiting, and some even fell into a coma. Still, they all ended up dead. He dials another number, and a man behind Eddie had his phone ringing. He answers, and Eddie hears his voice from the other line. Eddie recognizes him as the man who was spying on him. It's the same man who had followed Eddie and the model to the hotel. Eddie starts running, and the man follows him. Eddie runs through the streets, swerving through traffic. He finally makes his way into a taxi cab to the meeting place with Melissa. Melissa tells Eddie that Vernon's death didn't surprise her and says she knows about the NZT. She took it too but soon decided to get off of it. Having the brain function at a prolonged high level of mental activity would result in mental fatigue and burnout. She got scared and stopped taking NZT suddenly. She felt lazy, unfocused, and had problems maintaining her job. 2 years have passed, and the after effects still haven't worn off. She recommends that Eddie stop taking the pill too but tells him to lower the dosage as a sudden stop would be lethal. Eddie heads home but runs into Gennady. Gennady beats up Eddie and demands his payment. They stumble their way up Eddie's apartment, and Eddie drops an NZT pill. Gennady picks up the pill, believing it to be some kind of drug, and takes it himself. They then head to the bank, and Eddie gives him the money. Gennady notes that the pill made him feel excellent, and he'd be asking for more soon. Eddie makes his way to Lindy's office and collapses. Eddie is left with no choice but to tell Lindy everything. Lindy finally understands the source of Eddie's newfound motivation and agrees to retrieve the pills for him. She heads home, takes the rest of the drugs, and heads back. On her way back, she sees the man following him. She runs into the city park and asks 2 men to help her, but the pursuer stabs both men and continues chasing after Lindy. Lindy hides behind some boulders and calls Eddie. Eddie advises her to take one of the pills as it would give her the power to overcome the situation, and she does. After the pill takes effect, she knows what she has to do to escape from the man chasing her. She runs into the ice skating rink and carries a child, spinning her around and allowing the child's ice skates to slice the man's face. The man falls, and Lindy gets away. The following day, Lindy expresses her concerns about the pill, saying it turned her into a completely different person. Eddie promises he'll stop taking the pill as soon as he gets enough money. On the street, Eddie sees Gennady spying on him. Eddie approaches, and Gennady says he needs more of the pill. Eddie gives him a few but realizes Gennady won't stop. Eddie hires 2 bodyguards, thinking he'd need security with him at all times. He meets with Carl again and apologizes for how he behaved earlier, saying he was just sick. Carl is unimpressed with Eddie's apology but says he has seen the projections Eddie had sent and is once again impressed. Soon, Eddie would broker what he calls the biggest merger in corporate history between Carl Van Loon and Hank Atwood. Eddie discovers that if he slept properly, stayed hydrated and fed, abstained from alcohol, and maintained a steady dose, the blackout episode stopped. He has suits custom made for him, all with a hidden pocket for all the NZT he has. He finds a chemist and asks him to reverse engineer the pill, hoping to make more of his own. While having lunch, he spots the detective that interviewed him about Vernon's death. The detective informs him that Eddie is now a suspect in the model's death as one eyewitness placed him at the crime scene. Eddie hires Morris Brandt, one of the best and most ruthless lawyers in New York. Brandt gets him walking free temporarily, saying the evidence the police had is too weak. Carl and Eddie meet with Atwood again, and they observe Atwood's deteriorating health, and Eddie notes that Atwood isn't even over the age of 60. Eddie heads back to his hotel room and finds someone had broken in and, he assumes, is looking for the NZT. Security is now a primary concern, so he decides to buy a luxurious penthouse apartment with a top-of-the-notch security system. Later, Eddie runs into Gennady, who now has his own set of thugs guarding him. Eddie recognizes that Gennady, too, must be taking the pill. Gennady demands 20 more pills and blackmails Eddie with the model's death. The following day, the contract signing with Atwood is scheduled, but Carl is worried as Atwood is late. Atwood's wife arrives later and tells them her husband had suffered pain and dizziness and is currently hospitalized. She makes clear that they still want to proceed with the contract as soon as Atwood is able. They walk her down, and Eddie sees her driver is the man who had been stalking him. Eddie joins Brand at the police station that afternoon, where Eddie has to enter a police lineup. Eddie takes his jacket off and hands it to Brand. After the lineup, he meets up with Brand again, and he tells him that Eddie is cleared of suspicion. Brand then compliments Eddie's suit jacket. He makes his way back to Carl's office and discovers Atwood is now in a coma. He heads to the bathroom to take another pill and discovers his secret pocket is empty. His stash is gone. He goes back to Carl, and a package is brought to him. He opens it and sees his disembodied bodyguard's hands inside. In shock, he runs out of Carl's office and hurries home. He watches a news report regarding updates on Atwood's situation and sees that Brand is also Atwood's attorney. He finally understands and couldn't help himself from laughing. Eddie then hears banging at his door and notices from the surveillance cameras that Gennady had arrived with his goons, using metal grinders and steel cutters to break in. Stuck in an inescapable situation, Eddie steps up to the balcony, readying himself to jump. As his foot slips, he stops himself, trying to remember if he had left even just a single tablet somewhere. He digs through his mind and recalls one being left in his old tin container. He searches through the boxes and finds it, but Gennady breaks in, and Eddie trips on a box, losing the pill.
Okay,
Gennady's goons pin Eddie
dude.
down, and Gennady shows Eddie an even better way of using NZT. He dissolves it and injects it directly into his bloodstream. He says it's more potent this way and even lasts longer. Eddie looks around at his assailants and notices one of them has a blind eye. Gennady takes out several medical instruments, including knives, blades, and pliers, intending to torture Eddie into giving him more NZT. The henchmen start grinding into the safe in the next room while Gennady approaches Eddie, but Eddie stabs him with a knife he had earlier concealed. The two struggle and Eddie drives the blade into Gennady, killing him. Eddie lays on the floor next to a bleeding Gennady. He eyes the needle Gennady had used to inject the NZT and decides to drink Gennady's blood, hoping to get some of the NZT into him. It works, and his brain starts working at total capacity. He lays on the floor and waits for the half-blind henchman to come back. As the henchman flips Eddie over, he spits out the syringe needle directly into the man's seeing eye, blinding him completely.
What?
The other henchman runs in, but Eddie outsmarts them, hiding in a room and using a TV to bash his pursuant's head. Eddie runs, but a henchman catches up to him, choking him. Eddie kicks him off, and the blind henchman shoots the other henchman by accident. The blind henchman then starts firing his gun, hoping to hit Eddie, but Eddie manages to disable him by pushing the man into a window using a piano. At the hospital, Hank Atwood dies. Eddie appears at the hospital and sits next to the driver. He wonders how Atwood died even though they successfully got the NZT pills for him. The driver then helps Eddie find Brand, finding out that Brand had kept the pills for himself rather than give them to Atwood. They find the drugs in Brand's closet. Several years pass, and Eddie is now running for governor. He gets a call that a man representing a large pharmaceutical firm is waiting for him in his office. Eddie is surprised to see that the man is Carl. Carl tells Eddie he left Wall Street a while back and is now in the pharmaceutical industry. Carl reveals that he now knows about NZT, telling Eddie that the company he owns manufactures the drug. Carl offers Eddie a steady supply of NZT in exchange for a few favors he would later ask. Eddie refuses Carl's offer, but Carl warns that the illegal NZT labs have all been shut down, telling Eddie that they alone manufacture the NZT now. Eddie then reveals that he doesn't take NZT anymore. He had the drug tweaked and edited a while back, removing the side effects. He slowly took less and less NZT until he no longer depended on it, but the effects of the drug remained permanent on him. The modified NZT had permanently altered his brain patterns, and now, Eddie's brain is fully unlocked even off the drug. Eddie shows this by predicting a van would hit a car because the driver is distracted. Carl looks over, and it happens. Eddie then places his hand on Carl's chest, saying he detects several problems with Carl's heart. Carl warns Eddie that he would be a brutal enemy, but Eddie is not threatened, saying he'd always be 50 steps ahead of him. Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out.
And then what?
Thank you for watching. To Movie Caps. Today I will show you a crime, drama, thriller film from 2014, titled The Gambler. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Jim Bennett is sitting at his grandfather's deathbed.
Okay, and then when I click chat, guys, I watch it. I'll do a little bit of the gamble before I go to bed.
His last
Just
breath.
a little bit.
He is one of the richest people.
I don't
in
have to. I
California.
kind of just want to.
He leaves his grandson no inheritance. Jim says he will miss him, but he calls his crap. Jim does not care about his grandfather's wealth. He's just sad that he's dying and relives the last memories of him in his head. Jim visits an underground casino with tight security. He exchanges his stack of dollars for chips, goes to a blackjack table, and bets all the chips on the first hand. On the next hand, he doubles his bet. Again, he looks at the camera and doubles his bet as if to taunt the security guards. After losing one of his hands, he still looks like he wants to double his bet. Even with no chips, Jim calls the dealer an amateur and demands a double. He loses $80,000 on a single hand, owing to casino 40,000. Neville comes up to him and asks him what's going on, maybe if he wants to gamble for one round. Neville bets 10,000 against Jim's 500 on a high card. Jim loses and seems unfazed by what just happened. Neville points out that he's a guy who likes to lose. So he proposes a loan to him, which he declines. He goes to the owner of the casino, Mr. Lee, and asks for another loan. Mr. Lee explains to him that he came to the casino with $10,000, but instead of paying his loan, he gambled it away. The total amount he owes is $240,000 and he wants it paid back in 7 days. Jim comes back to Neville and asks him about the stake he offered, $50,000. He says his interest is high. Jim does not care. He pays off his debt to the casino of $40,000 that he lost earlier and takes one blue chip, $10,000, from the chip register and goes straight to the blackjack table. Dealer glances at pit boss if she may deal. As before, he doubles his bets and goes on a roll. After going from $10,000 to $80,000, he gets a winning blackjack hand that pays him 3-2, and he decides to bet all on roulette.
It's supposed to be 2.5.
It rolls red and he loses. One of the waitresses is Jim's student, Amy, who Jim recognizes. After the loss, the crowd disperses and Mr. Lee is displeased. In the morning, he leaves the casino owing to 2 large gangs. 7 days left. He's heading straight for the campus. Jim is a literacy professor standing freely in front of his class, and there he sees Amy. He seems natural and confident. Jim discredits novel writing as a profession, saying it's mediocre. There are plenty of happy electricians. If you are not a genius, do not bother. He points to one of the boys in the class. His name is Dexter. He is a good tennis player. He asks him what he is after, the game or the money, fame or virtue? Both, he replies. That's greed. Continuing this train of thought, he quotes an author, Vespasian, "Dear God, I think I am becoming a god," before saying Amy beats him to it on her laptop. Jim notes that Amy is the most well-read person in this class, noting that he barely writes adequately compared to her. He asks her why she hides her writing talent and tries to fit in. She says it's safest to be in the middle. He starts to question her family situation, and when he does not see any advantages, like her father or mother being writers or rich, he asks why she is better than the rest of them. He ends the lecture by telling her to sit where she belongs, in front of the class, or she should not bother showing up at all. Jim is visiting his mother, Roberta. She is playing tennis against Dexter, a boy in Jim's class. He's her coach. She talks a good game and says if he gives her one more point she'll fire him. Jim is only there to demand money from her. Roberta knows Jim is in trouble. She'd buy it if he was looking for meaning in life, but that's different. She points out he's not narcissistic or stupid. He's her son, so what's the point of his behavior? She has said goodbye to people she loved before. Jim, yeah, whatever happened with Dad? He implies that she can be a cruel woman. She tells him she will not give him any more money. Jim kisses her on the cheek and leaves. She looks crushed. When he gets a call from Neville about his debt, he throws his phone into a pond. 6 days left. A man picks up Jim and drives him to Frank's. He is a loan shark who lends large sums of money. After calculating how much Jim earns, he puts him in his place and says that his yearly salary does not even cover it. He lists everything about Jim: birth, education, intelligence, talent, looks, family, money. Is it all a real burden to him? Frank assumes Jim is dancing with the devil because there is no reason he should owe Neville and the Koreans money. Basically, he's self-destructive. With the loan Frank offers Jim, he would get $260,000 and would have to pay 10% interest weekly. Where would he get the money? Jim just says that he will get the money.
Just gamble
Frank
it.
tells him that he will lend it to him if he humiliates himself. To put it in a nutshell, if he says he is not a man. Jim leaves. He's in a lecture hall when Amy walks in and sits down, asking him if he meant what he said in the lecture about her having talent. He answers over the loudspeaker, absolutely. Amy basically tells him that he's a genius, but for some reason, Jim just cannot accept that. He comes closer and tells her she has to leave. He cannot have her here, it's inappropriate. Amy leaves without her bag and comes back with Jim's book and asks him to sign it. She wants to know the truth about him, but he will not open up. Amy asks him out, he declines and she leaves. 5 days left. Neville calls Jim, who has heard that he has approached Frank for a loan, and inquires about his debt to him. He says he did not like the terms, so he didn't get the money. In class, one of his students who is always on the phone, Lamar, says that he doesn't understand killing oneself and asks him how he can be depressed driving a BMW A1. Jim asks him, does it look like I am happy? He's not happy because he's teaching the modern novel to a classroom full of students who do not care. He might as well be stark naked on the desk and no one would care. He's in this class pretending to teach and the students are pretending to learn. He dismisses the class because he feels defeated and asks Lamar to stay behind. He asks him what he needs to do to stop using his phone. The school told Jim to give him a good grade even if he fails because he is a star basketball player. Lamar explains that Jim is not the only one who has problems in his life.
What does it mean to be a
He
god?
understands the message he is sending, all or nothing. To be or not to be. It's the same for him. He needs to go pro because he has a need problem and his family needs money, all or nothing. It's as if Jim recognizes himself in Lamar. Jim's car is towed as collateral for Neville's loan. Jim's mother arrives and hands him a new phone. He is pissed that she is in his house. She asks him if he still needs help with the money. He says that's already been taken care of. When she says a thug has been in her house, he writes down the amount he owes them. Jim says if he does not pay, they'll break every bone in his body and go after his family, to which Roberta slaps him and tells him he's a disgrace. They visit the bank. Roberta asks a bank clerk for $260,000 in cash and to not ask any questions. She tells Jim that this is the last money she will ever give him and that she will disown him if he ever asks for more. Jim does not care about his mother. He tells her that they are only talking because of her finances.
You guys,
She walks away defeated.
the thing is, at this point, he can either pay the loan back or he could put it all in and double.
4 days left. Amy drives up to Jim,
I know what I would
who
do.
is sitting on a bench, and tells him that if she has to engage in an inappropriate relationship to get him out of his job, she's ready to go. Sometime later they are at a deserted location. Jim asks Amy, "What if I told you I am not a gambler?" She says that she has seen him as a professor, and he is not one of those. She believes him. Jim is a perfect example of how someone who starts out with no problems whatsoever, go out of their way to have them all. He asks Amy to help him start over. They visit a local casino. At the blackjack table he trades $10,000 for chips, bets $500 and after getting a total score of 18, he asks for a double. He gets a 3, but it still feels like he is playing for a loss. On the next hand, he goes all in and loses. He keeps rebuying and losing. After a while, Amy finds Jim and asks, "Everything?" He grins. He explains his true feelings to Amy. He wants it all, total victory, there is no gray area, you either take it all or lose it all. And he would rather die than not achieve it. Just as he finishes, Amy kisses him. Later, Neville ambushes Jim in an alley. He's looking for his money.
Guys,
After Jim
this is what I did in Rust. Okay, this is the mindset that I have. You know what happened in Rust? I ended with 48,000 fucking scrap. You know why? Because I'm a fucking gambling slot whisperer,
tells him he does not
machine
have his
whisperer,
money. Neville
juicer,
asks him
international
if he knows
gambler.
Lamar.
Now what?
At home, he receives a message from Neville saying that the number he gave him is not Lamar's. Jim grabs a gun and takes a swig of whiskey. 2 days left. Jim wakes up with Mr. Lee's gang in his house. They are worried that Jim will try to do something to himself before he pays back his debt. Jim sits down in front of Mr. Lee and says that there is only one way to pay back the debt. He has to lend him another $100,000. They take this as an insult and throw Jim in a full bathtub and drive away. As Jim leaves the bathroom,
The
he
100K
sees
is right
that
there.
they misspelled Monday and scoffs. At the pawn shop, Jim wants to sell his watch and asks for $3,500. He will not haggle, just answer yes or no. When the owner counters with $1,200, he leaves immediately. Neville's men kidnap Jim right outside the shop.
What?
He is tied to a chair. Neville asks him how he's going to pay him back and Jim jokingly says he's going to write another book. Neville asks if he would give him the money if he lit a cigar and stubbed it out on his eyeball. Do I look like a magician? Neville's muscle man comes up and slaps Jim. Neville wants Lamar to throw tomorrow's basketball game so they do not win by more than 8 points because he'll bet on it. If Jim does not do what he says, he will kill Amy. At campus, Jim packs his stuff and tells Amy to hold out her hand and say goodbye. If he gets to her, then he's done. If he does not, then he's dead. And what do you do with the dead? You bury them. Amy turns and leaves.
Huh?
Jim walks out of the school and gives away his watch to a random student. He sees Lamar and offers him money if he throws the game tomorrow. Jim asks him because he knows Lamar needs the money and it's his decision. Jim comes to Frank, he's out of options. Frank asks him if he has the sense to leave if he has to. Frank likes Jim, so he changes the terms. He'll only give him the money if he's able to say get screwed to anyone, even Frank himself. If he gives him the money and he does not pay it back, then there are no more rules.
What?
Then he cannot say screw you to anyone. He'll wipe out Jim's entire bloodline. Do you understand the gravity of your situation? Jim says screw you and Frank hands him the keys to a car with $260,000 in it. Jim is standing in front of a nail salon.
Double
Mr.
down
leaves
again.
him with the money bag. He goes inside and instead of handing him the money, He tells him he wants Mr. Lee to loan him and he will get him his money. He gets beaten up by Mr. Lee's man and still speaks disrespectfully to Mr. Lee and demands $150,000. Mr. Lee laughs and gives him the money. Last day. Jim
Boom.
gives Lamar $150,000 to
410.
throw the Wildcats basketball game. Neville is watching, Jim is in the stadium. In the first half, Lamar plays like he always does, making Neville uncomfortable. When Lamar starts missing easy throws, he gets booed by the crowd and is substituted. Lamar feels humiliated. The Wildcats had a 14-point lead and now they are losing. Lamar is back in the game, he remembers Jim saying it was still his call and he decides to win the game. If the Wildcats win the game by less than 8 points, it's still considered a toss-up. In the final seconds, Lamar has the ball and he throws, misses and wins the game for the Wildcats and Neville's bet. Sometime later Jim sits in Neville's office and asks if they are even. He hands him his money with interest and when Neville inquires where he got the money, he says he got it from Frank. Neville knows what kind of man Frank is and is disgusted with Jim. Jim had sent Dexter to Las Vegas to bet all the money he got from Frank on a Wildcats win by 7 points or less. Jim calls Frank and tells him he got his money and they need to meet in Koreatown. Reluctantly Frank
Wait,
agrees.
what?
Jim grabs all the money he can and heads to underground Korean establishments. The casino section. There he meets Mr. Lee, whom he tells he got his money and points out that Frank is there too, and he owes them both money. He does not have enough to pay them both, so he'll bet it all on roulette, either he'll pay them both back or none. Mr. Lee and Frank cannot do anything to Jim because Koreatown is run by another gang of mobsters. He takes out all the cash, the room goes silent, places it on the roulette table and says all on black. The leader of the Koreatown gang nods like he's taking the bet. The ball lands on black. With a sigh of relief, Jim turns and tells him that the money is for the two gentlemen and that he is not actually a gambler. Jim leaves Koreatown. Frank pulls up near him and says here is $100,000. There was a little extra from his bet, and it's on him. Jim says screw you. Jim is not a real gambler, he is someone who uses gambling merely as a means of self-destruction. His primary goal is to lose everything. Nobody who wants to win doubles up on every single hand. Jim was seeking the loss. He runs all the way.
Stop
across
tagging me in
town
the
to
chat,
Ren's
it's fucking
house
weird.
and knocks on her door. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.